Who wants to go first? Volunteers.
Yeah, I don't mind coming in.
Okay, thank you, Patrick.
So,
are you going to present it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So our group's talk was originally focused on the climate strike. There were a number of people who did think it was wrong for students to be striking during school times, and we had a bit of a debate around that. We also looked at looking at more individualistic actions, such as to do with plastic usage, and also like campaigns and lobbying schools and such, which is something that we did look at Youth Strike for Climate. But once again, our focus was in building a movement capable of changing the government's direction and policy towards climate change. And we thought, well, it was clear the only way we could do that would be through media attention, public pressure, by organising protests on the streets during school time. One of our slogans was, no education for a future that we won't have. And actually, the point of education should be sort of building and supporting our futures if we don't have a future to go to, because the evidence is clear. Environmental collapse will lead to eventually, potentially, mass death and suffering for people, even in Western countries that seem ready to deal with the effects of climate crisis. Obviously, the effects will be felt first and foremost by the global south. And we also did look at the global south, and for example, how industries that we can't whitewash the climate movement, and that actually, for example, the usage of minerals that exist in solar panels and in electric batteries and such are mined at the expense of the suffering of even people as young as 6 and children in West Africa and other places in the third world. In fact, there was a 6-year-old child who died in a cobalt mine, and it found out that this cobalt mine was going to producing the batteries for Tesla's electric cars. So I think we have to look at the whole system and its oppressive and destructive measures, and I think that's the whole system we need to look at changing. Obviously, we did look at getting some more concrete actions for Penistone and Stocksbridge. One of them was being part of the I think it was Penistone Against Plastic group that has been launched, as well as looking at housing as one of the most environmentally damaging aspects of one of the most highest emitters of CO2 is housing and heating of housing, and actually looking at eco-friendly retrofitting for housing and how that could come about through actions and lobbying of the town council. That was kind of the extent of the debate and the discussion of our group. So I'll finish there.
Thank you. Great. Do we want to allow questions between the speakers? Nick, Barry.
Sorry, Andy, I can't stay for questions. I've got to go.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Patrick.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thanks,
I've really
Patrick.
enjoyed the session.
Okay.
May I just say something? It's Frank Horsman here. I'm sorry. We've had interruptions and things, but I've just put water source heat pump in. So, I've really learned a hell of a lot about it. So if I can contribute here,
well, were you in a great breakout group?
No, I've had to come and go. We're laying the floor over the underfloor heating. So
have you time to wait for the other breakout group rapporteurs and speak? You can speak after them. That's fine.
That would be great. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
I need to go just now. Sorry.
Well, are you coming back?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Thanks.
All right. Who's volunteering to speak next?
I could go next if that's all right.
Yes, great, Holly.
Okay. So we kind of looked at the Well, a few points were raised actually. So Christine quite rightly mentioned sort of access to green spaces and the impact on health. So we need to make them available. So available for people with struggle to walk or in wheelchairs, and for the elderly and mobility issues. So we also I learned that there was community groups set up immediately for support and help and shopping. So we sort of came to the conclusion that building in the community has a significant impact on health in terms of isolation and support that can really make a difference. We spoke about better social care. With that, the wider problems of dealing with better paid workers, which would mean a bigger workforce and less pressured teams, which means they'd be able to give longer for their visits. Excuse me, I can't remember who brought it up, sorry, but being able to kind of rationalise the logistics of care workers. So if there was a bigger workforce, then they would have to travel less distance to get to their patients, which would have an impact on emissions. We spoke about, so David mentioned about sort of how the funding of the NHS is distributed, and at the moment it's very transactional, and we're not looking at the wider picture. That kind of thing. We looked at sort of bringing the funding and the NHS sort of keeping it nationalised, being brought back into public ownership and control. We talked about sort of private firms having less protection, private carers. And Julie so she made some really good points about transport and what's been going on. So I was going to invite Julie to come in and speak on her own behalf, if that's okay.
Thanks, yeah. I think we had quite an interesting debate. Obviously, it was around health impacts, and we have been doing quite a lot of work in the town for a number of years in relation to that. Most of it has been volunteer-led. We've had the health forum that's been going for a number of years that actually put together a health strategy in conjunction with Sheffield University a few years ago, looking at the gaps in the surveys. That then quite nicely fed into the fact that the local community-run leisure centre got the contract for the People Keeping Well initiative that the City Council runs. So there was a lot of funding given to the leisure centre. They employed a social prescribing worker who has been able to do some fantastic work around the town, dealing with all sorts of impacts that just life living in a town in the north of the city has on people. They also organised all the volunteers and support work, which is still actually ongoing, for support for the local community during COVID, and the volunteers have been doing some great work. At the height of the first lockdown, we had over 40 volunteers work, supporting the local community there. So that was really good. Yesterday, we have a Towns Fund board that was set up in line with government guidance, and yesterday the bid went into the government for £25 million to regenerate the whole of the town. There's been consultations with the town on that. We won't know until probably June time how successful we've been or not. But one thing that we have put in there is a health strategy, because we do feel that it's important. I think Tricia was in our group, pointed out that, we have an above average elderly population in the town. So that, of course, brings with it things that clearly need to be factored in and done. So the fact that we have hopefully we'll have a properly organised health strategy should really help the town moving forward. So it was just about really taking the opportunity to update on those things, and just coming completely out of left field because it's just popped into my head. And I know Barry will be delighted to hear this. We do have 2 electric charging points being put in the car park on Johnston Street by the co-op.
Oh, that's great.
Sometime, hopefully around March time, they should be installed. So that's a little bit of good news that I'm just lobbing in there because it's just come into my head. But thanks.
That sounds great, Julie. Thank you. Barry, your hand was up to speak. Was it accidental? Yeah. I'm going to suggest, since we've got 2 more rapporteurs to go, but I think we're okay to take any other questions at this point. We run a little bit late.
Fran's been raising her hand.
Fran.
Yeah, I was going to report back, Andy, on the transport group. But
right, go ahead, please.
Okay, right. I'm delighted that Julie's just made a contribution because your name came up in our discussion, Julie. I'm sorry that you didn't get to our group. Because one of the things we talked about, we only got on at the end really to what particular things we think should happen. I'll say something about the general discussion in a moment as well. But we wondered about the possibility of the Towns Fund that Stocksbridge has apparently been awarded, using some of that to look at issues around transport. And I'm not sure whether they would actually have the power to do very much, because I think one of the issues around public transport is the lack of power and lack of democratic control over the kind of decisions that are made about routes and how things are organised. You know, we thought that finding out about the possibility of that, probably through you, would be a very useful way forward. General points that we will raise. Well, really, we looked at the issue of what happens if you're reliant on public transport and how a poor service actually really creates issues, but also why people choose not to use bus services. A couple of examples were given of buses that run empty, and the fact that in one instance from Charles, the particular company says basically it gets paid to run the route, so it really doesn't care whether they have passengers or not. So changing like where there's a bus stop that might be more convenient for people isn't on their radar really. And that again comes down, I think, to that total lack of any democratic control over what actually happens, that, you know, bus companies, whether they're tiny private companies or whether they're big companies like Stagecoach or First, have different priorities to what most passengers and communities would think are the priorities. An interesting contribution was made by Jennifer, who has come recently to this area, having lived in London, and she compared what happens in London, the frequency of services and the fact that you can buy one ticket that will take you across various routes and so on, so that fares are much simpler and actually much cheaper in London than they are here. And the buses are very, very heavily used. Now, I know that's a very much an urban area, but I think it's quite important to note that in London, you haven't got deregulation and privatisation. You've actually got a situation where it's a franchise situation where basically TfL, Transport for London, draws up contracts, decides what routes are going to be run, sets the fares, sets the routes, sets the timetables, and the local companies have to abide by that and by their rules. And to me, that's a much better way of running any sort of system. But we did also have a discussion about the particular needs of a rural community, that we could look at it much more imaginatively. There were a couple of very interesting ideas. One person pointed out that what you could have is very small transports, minibuses, that runs through the little villages, and then you have a hub system where they go to the main roads, where you can then pick up a normal bus that would take you to whatever centres or places you want to go to. And that again is a very logical way of looking at it, that I think is the kind of vision that we need to put forward. Somebody else talks about the possibility of a subsidised taxi service, like an Uber type service, perhaps minibuses rather than individual cars, but that being a situation where, again, you could have transport that goes from where you are to where you want to be, which is not the situation really with the current system. And Charles talked about a bigger vision for the far distant future, really, where you've got autonomous cars, is that the word? that you call them. Anyway, when they drive themselves and they could buzz about and, you know, you could call them up and they'd come and pick you up. And that kind of vision is really important to have, I think, although it's a million miles away from the situation we've got now. Another proposal that came out was we need to be doing, or somebody needs to be doing, the kind of research, market research, that means we actually find out where people want to go, why they don't use buses, what we'd need to have to encourage them onto that. And in a way, that's the kind of work that the Better Buses campaign is doing to some extent, although we haven't got the resources to do that fully. But I think it's something that the replacement for the SYPTE, the South Yorkshire Passenger Transport Authority under Dan Jarvis, should actually be looking at really carefully, particularly in the more isolated communities. And I just want to abuse my position as rapporteur to say, obviously, I am a convener of the Better Buses campaign. I've put the information about that and the way you can link either with me or with the campaign on the chat. And we have people who are bus users, would-be bus users, climate campaigners, trade unions, people from Labour Party branches, individuals coming to our meetings to try and develop strategies to put pressure on to improve the way things are. Our next meeting's on February the 10th, and anybody who would like to come along, just drop me an email and I'll add you to the email list and give you the details of the meeting. But I'd like to thank everybody in our group, because there's some really good personal contributions, and we need to have those personal stories, I think, to hammer home what the issues are at the moment.
Barry, thank you. That's great. Thanks, Fran. Barry, do you want to?
Yes. So our group was mainly talking about energy. Our sort of three questions were: what should the powers that be do with regard to energy, renewable energy in particular? What can the individuals and communities do, and how do we influence them? So people were rightly critical of the government. The government's made lots of promises to do with energy, renewable energy, but often these don't come to anything. It's a bit like the contracts they place with ferry companies don't have ferries, PPE companies that can't really have any knowledge of PPE, etc., coming down to, I suppose, what you might call greenwash. So firstly, looking at, say, energy efficiency, which is critical to it's critical to reduce the amount of energy that houses uses, particularly if we're going to go to, which we hope go to using electricity predominantly. There were lots of promises, one of which was to make the building of a certain number of sustainable houses, and this was scrapped by the government. Just one of many initiatives that didn't come to anything. There was quite a bit of discussion about how we can move to building more sustainable homes, passive houses. I think everybody was obviously in favour of that. Councils, I think, are stymied, and they can't demand that you build these houses, as opposed to the 4 and 5 bed executive properties that we see springing up generally in this area, rather than homes that really people need. So energy efficiency is critical. We live in an area, like most of the country, where there's large numbers of old houses. It's difficult to make old houses energy efficient without knocking them down, and we really need more support for people that want to make old houses energy efficient. There needs to be more advisory bodies to give advice, and hopefully funding to bring it to fruition. There was examples about local communities wanting to get involved in energy efficiency. One example was a group of 20 homes wanting to put in double glazing, and they had the capacity to do it themselves, but they're forbidden to do it themselves. If they had to employ a contractor, it would cost much more. There are organisations evolving to provide tools and experience to help communities to do this themselves, and that's to be supported. I've lost my track now. Yes, there were discussions about pension schemes and trying to devolve pension schemes away from fossil fuels and what we can do about that. There was discussions about local communities being able to develop their own energy systems, heating systems, PV panels, batteries, etc. Would need obviously support for that. And discussions about the fact that if we do move to electrical energy heating homes and powering homes, then the grid needs to be reconfigured, and that is not currently possible with plethora of individual companies supplying electricity and running the electricity across the country. They have no forward vision really for this, and they would want to be massively funded for it. I think that's probably enough for the time being. Thanks.
Thank you. Right, I think as chair, it falls to either. Oh, we didn't miss anybody out, did we? No, it falls to either you or Nick to just sort of sum up what we've done and talk about the next event.
Well, okay. We thought about another event in either another month or 2 months. I don't think we come to a firm conclusion about the timetable, have we?
We haven't. No. I mean, I don't know. It would be interesting to hear if anybody feels that this was useful enough to try and do it again, and perhaps on some different subjects, but who knows?
And also useful for people to propose any topics that would be useful for the next event and speakers.
Yes. There is a feedback form. I've posted it already, but I'll post the link again for people. If you just hang on while I get to where I've got it to copy it from. Okay, hang on.
I mentioned on the chat, I had to sign in with my email address before I joined the Zoom.
Yes, that's
correct. Did everybody
correct.
have to do that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So are you keeping all those email addresses? Are you...
They're kept private.
Yeah. Are you able to email some information out to us?
Yes, that was one of the intentions behind the fact that we've registered it. We know that the local Labour Party has meetings which don't require registration, which fooled a lot of people. We did our best to reach people on that issue, but not all of the communication worked, I'm afraid.
Well, I think you have to ask everybody if they mind having their email.
Well, yes. It's a we have it as a as a requirement. There are reasons for it. So one of those is so that we can email afterwards, but it's not the only one. Some people were a bit worried that there might be opponents of the issue come on and be abusive. So we felt it happier if we knew everybody who was on the call, if we had a way of identifying everybody who was on the call. So that's
absolutely fine as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, I've also said I don't know how I go back to chats afterwards and find information.
I've posted it again.
I know you keep posting. I'll have to write it down then. So
okay, no. I will post. If
you email it out to me, that'll be fine.
There will be a follow-up email. Everybody who attended will get a follow-up email.
Okay. Otherwise, I was going to ask the Wakefields because they're technical people.
Okay. If we do chat rooms next time, we'll do it better. I promise.
I've never used the chat room before. I'm very proud of myself.
No, I meant if we use the breakout room, okay, and it was we got a setting wrong. That's what happened. So
Andy, have we got time to go back to Frank? I forgot to mention.
Yes.
Frank wanted to make a contribution, didn't you?
Oh,
Frank?
yes, of course. Sorry.
Yeah, it was just that the guy was talking when I came back. I do apologise for this. We had our Tyler turn up unexpectedly, so we had to attend to him. But we've just had a water-based heat pump installed. I think it's actually the same model as Charles Booth's, but it's been it's been an epic, actually. And if I can in any way contribute what I've learned, which has been a lot, then I'd love to do that. I mean, that's why we did it in the first place, really. So
maybe you might like to contribute to another meeting, Frank, maybe, because
yeah,
I mean, it's hopefully other people will be, others, maybe small businesses, maybe, well, other people might be thinking about a water-based system, maybe. It would be useful.
Yeah, well, whatever, you know, ordinary ground-based or whatever. Yeah,
that'd be useful. Thanks. Yeah. Can I ask Rachel? Did you make any sense of the contribution so far for your sort of visioning event? I don't know. Is Rachel still there?
I'm going to share the screen with you all.
Oh, great.
Please do. Yeah.
That's the last one. That's it.
Uh-huh.
Can
Right.
you see it?
Okay.
There are still a few more notes coming.
Okay.
Very last session,
Go on.
but that's it.
Thanks, Raquel.
Thanks.
Okay.
We'll use it in some way in the publicity for the next
Yes. Yes. Good.
Yeah.
event. Email it to me, please, Raquel.
Yeah, of course. Oh,
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Raquel.
thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think something I would like to point out is that this is no aspersions on people who had to go early, but you know, there's a lot of people still here, so obviously it's something people care about a great deal, and it's pleasing to see that you do all care about it a great deal. So thank you very much, everybody. Please fill in the feedback form. Yet again, I'll post it here. I will also email it out to everybody who was on the call. It's very rudimentary. There's only like it's those questions that that you sent to me, Barry. So they're very simple questions. Okay, has anybody got anything else to?
Well, can I say that I guess we'll be at some point, I guess that the three of us will be producing a summary of this for the report. Is that fair to say? And we'll be using this in the publicity.
I think that's a fair. Yeah, I think that would be good. Yeah.
It's probably impossible to summarize it now without thinking about it. But
well, quite. And we have to decide what we're going to do with the video.